There is one more important topic called automatic semicolon insertion, which we are discussing in this lecture. The question I am raising here is, what is automatic semicolon insertion, or what is ASI in JavaScript? The category of this question is JS programming language, that is JS language, and there will be three relative questions with this topic. You must have used semicolon many times in JavaScript code. Almost all lines are terminated by a semicolon, if you have practice of ending with a semicolon, of course. Also, you must have observed that when you do not write a semicolon, if you forget to write, then also JavaScript is not going to give you any error. And the reason for not showing error is that the compiler automatically adds a semicolon at the end of those lines. Let's try a simple code here. I will simply say console.log hi. Now I don't write a semicolon here. The next line is console.log test, and I put a semicolon here. So here in this code, both the lines are executed properly. After the end of first line, a semicolon is automatically inserted. This means writing a semicolon at the end of line is optional in JavaScript. And it also means that when there is a line break, like on this line console.log, JavaScript inserts a semicolon at the end of line, and this very feature is called as automatic semicolon insertion, or ASI. Remember, JavaScript does not insert a semicolon on every line break, that is on every new line. Let's try one more example to understand that. I will declare a variable. I'll say let a is equal to, I will say 4 into the multiplication sign. Now I press enter here and I say 5, and console.log I try to display value of a. Here the output is 20, which is correct without any error, whereas I have already added a line break after the multiplication sign. As it finds an operator alone, it understands that there is something more remaining. So this means in some cases JavaScript does not add a semicolon, and that's where JavaScript creates a problem, and as a developer you must know this behavior. Let's create one more code to understand. I'm going to create a function test. Now here I want to return an object literal, right? So I'll say return, but I'm pressing an enter here and opening the curly bracket on a new line. I'll say a:5, that's it, and I'll say const obj is equal to test. I'm calling the function, so now the function test should return the object literal, and we try to display it. Let's say console.log obj. Let's run the code, but now the output is undefined, whereas the function is returning the object literal. The output is undefined because internally a semicolon is added after return statement, which means this function does not return anything. Now let's bring this opening curly bracket on same line of return and run the code. Now you see that it is working as we want. It is returning the object literal. So test is returning proper object literal, which is received by obj, and we are displaying it. So this is the overall behavior of ASI, and you have to take care if you don't have practice to terminate lines with semicolon, or even in this case where we use a curly bracket on new line while returning an object literal. Now let's discuss few relative questions of this topic. The first question is, should you terminate all lines by a semicolon? Now as I mentioned, it's a good practice to have a semicolon at the end, though it is optional because JavaScript does insert a semicolon. But if you put it, it's a good practice. At least you have to make sure that even if you do not put semicolon, then also the line should not be terminated in an improper way, like return, and then if you are returning an object literal, then put a bracket. Even this is a common practice that when we write if condition, then we open the curly bracket on the same line. The second question is, a piece of code is shown like this, which we have already tried, and the question can be that why this code is returning undefined in spite of function returning a valid object literal. So we have already discussed why this happens. Or there can be another question, that what will be the output for this piece of code. The third question we can think of is, can use strict statement or the strict mode change the behavior of ASI? No, it doesn't change the behavior. If you write use strict, that does not mean that you have to end all lines with a semicolon. I mean the respective lines. Anyway, like if condition is never terminated with a semicolon, but lines which are to be terminated with a semicolon, that also, even if you use strict, it doesn't force you to put a semicolon on all lines.